Welcome, ghouls, to today's episode of Mental Health is Horrifying. I'm your horror Barbie host of darkness, Candace Green, psychotherapist and all-around spooky bitch, podcasting from my bat-filled cave in Toronto, Canada. Okay, I have something to admit. I haven't seen a single movie in the Terrifier franchise. I haven't, okay? So I'm doing something a little bit different today. Normally, when you listen to this podcast, I'm talking about a movie that I have seen. But today, I'm talking about a movie, actually an entire franchise of movies that I have not seen, why I have not seen them, and how this is an important psychological matter to consider, not only for me feeling like a fake horror fan, but for other ghouls out there who struggle with imposter syndrome. Okay, so let's get right into it. Let's check out Terrifier and how my not watching any of them relates to window of tolerance and imposter syndrome.
What if that guy did this to your car?
What guy? The clown? You really think someone slashed my tires?
Well, he knows this is your car. He saw us getting into it earlier.
Hey, handsome!
Cut it out.
My friend wants your number.
Kill you.
What is it, Tara?
Dawn and I are sort of stranded. She has a flat tire and no spare, and I was kind of hoping you could pick us up. What the hell is wrong with you?
What, did you think he was gonna hack me up into little pieces or something?
Well, here's my synopsis of the first Terrifier movie, but honestly, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Terrifier is about a homicidal clown named Art, who delights in torturing and murdering women. The movie takes place on Halloween night, which you'd think would make me more interested in seeing it, but nah. Art stalks women and tortures and kills them in creative and disgusting ways, and again, is very excited about this. I've read about many of these kills and feel reassured in my decision not to have seen this movie. The end. The Terrifier franchise is very popular. The franchise has taken in over 103 million globally, which is a lot, especially considering the graphic nature of these movies, being labeled as splattercore. I have watched from afar as the horror community at large has rallied around and celebrated the Terrifier franchise, with Art the Clown in particular becoming a beloved and ubiquitous horror villain in league with Ghostface, Michael Myers, and Chucky. You can now purchase Art t-shirts, dolls, mugs, and the like at Spirit Halloween and share Art memes, generally to express a sense of delight or mischievousness on whatever social media app you prefer. I have watched from afar as my friends in the horror community have rallied around Terrifier, while I have been rewatching the Halloween Town franchise once a year for my mental health. And while I love the Halloween Town franchise, 1 through 3, 4 doesn't exist, and if you know, you know. I do have to admit that I feel a bit left out, or to be honest, sometimes like an imposter. And that horror imposter syndrome was most recently stirred up when I saw that there is a Terrifier conference happening this May with the aim of celebrating the franchise as an object of scholarly importance. This conference is filled with lots of amazing sounding presentations on Terrifier as seen through an academic lens, and in any other scenario, something like this would be totally up my alley and I'd eat it up. But because it's Terrifier and I haven't seen these movies, I noticed this powerful feeling of being left behind, or to use a clinical term, FOMO. Here I am with my silly little horror podcast where I talk about horror and psychology, and I can't even engage with the premier Terrifier academic conference with all these other smart horror enthusiasts. Before we get into imposter syndrome, let's first talk about why I haven't seen Terrifier. My entire philosophy is that horror is for everybody, and it is such a broad, diverse genre, so everybody can find something that they enjoy and reap the mental health benefits while they're at it, like exploring nervous system regulation through things like jump scares, laughing and tension release, being able to explore fears in a safe environment that you are in control of, exploring our own personal shadows via horror villains and monsters, bonding with co-viewers, and boosted mood and adrenaline. I've spoken on this podcast before about a classification system I have created for horror as it pertains to the nervous system, and it's called the spooky scary spectrum of horror. Window of tolerance is key in appreciating this classification system, which refers to an optimal state of nervous system regulation in which we are able to function and thrive in everyday life. When we exist within this window, we are able to learn effectively, play, and relate well to ourselves and others. But when we are outside of our window of tolerance, we are in the panic zone, and you just can't get anything done there, let alone function. So if you're going to enjoy the mental health benefits of horror, it's important to consider your own personal window of tolerance, and this will look different for everyone. The spooky scary spectrum puts horror movies on a scale from spooky, so not so scary and your nervous system feels regulated, to the scary red zone at the other end of the spectrum, where you have gone past your window of tolerance and are curled up in the fetal position, anticipating having nightmares for 6 weeks. If you were to ask me to populate my own spooky scary spectrum chart with A, movies that are in the comfortable to stretch zone for me to watch in terms of window of tolerance, and B, horror genres that I like, you would probably find this chart peppered with gothic horror, movies about ghosts, witches, and haunted houses, and shiny 90s and Y2K horrors because that's when I grew up and I like to read 17 magazine. Listen, I absolutely do not judge anyone who watches Terrifier. In fact, I'm so intrigued by you. I've asked so many of my horror friends about the movies and their experience watching them and how they felt. And for the friends who really know me and the fact that I'm a sensitive angel / horror baby, they tell me that I might be better off skipping these because it just seems like they're not for me. Terrifier, along with other ultra-gory movies, falls into my panic zone, meaning when I watch really gory and gross movies, I don't enjoy them. I've experienced some pretty intense things when I watch ultra-violent movies, like feeling sick to my stomach. I notice my face will scrunch up in disgust. I'll want to cover my face with my hands. And I'll also feel a sense of shame, interestingly enough, which is something I should maybe psychoanalyze another time. I tend to feel very upset and even confused. You might know that I am an animal lover and really cannot watch anything where animals get hurt or might be sad. And of course, I have read about some of the kills in Terrifier. And I believe it's in the third one, maybe, that there's a kill involving a bunch of rats. And I know exactly what would happen to me if I saw rats being hurt. I would devolve into hysterics, much the same way I did when I watched Bambi. Think about watching horror movies in your panic zone or a complete state of nervous system dysregulation as similar to other thrill-seeking behaviors you might pass on, like bungee jumping, cave diving, or going outside without sunscreen on. Why risk it? Just because I logically know that Terrifier is outside my window of tolerance and I'm not trying to have a mental breakdown, that doesn't mean that my emotional self doesn't still occasionally feel like a horror imposter. If human beings were rational creatures, I wouldn't have a job. Imposter syndrome is a psychological phenomenon where individuals doubt their abilities and achievements, often despite evidence of their success or competency. People who experience this often have a feeling that their success is undeserved or was achieved due to a fluke, luck, or through some kind of charity. When you find yourself feeling like an imposter in any given scenario, whether it be at work, with a group of friends, or within a specific community, chances are that feeling did not start there. There is some kind of complex around rules, who decides them, belonging, or being good enough that started at another time in your life that is showing up in a current manifestation of imposter syndrome. Your childhood is a good place to check for messages about rules, belonging, or being good enough. Check in places like your family, your elementary or high school, or ballet class. What's interesting about imposter syndrome is that it seems to most commonly affect high-achieving individuals, which seems counterintuitive, right? But the problem is that these individuals struggle to internalize their success, and it is common for them to experience pervasive feelings of self-doubt, anxiety, depression, and/or apprehension of being exposed as a fraud. If you're someone who feels not good enough, chances are you are also a perfectionist. Because perfectionism means chasing impossible to reach standards in an attempt to fill that not good enough wound inside you that probably began a very long time ago. Perfectionists need to be the best and feel like they are constantly spinning their wheels in a seemingly never-ending attempt to achieve impossibly high or even ill-defined standards. And once they've reached those standards, well, guess what? Because they struggle to internalize their success, this one feels good for like 5 minutes, but then also becomes not good enough. And the imposter syndrome sufferer creates a new, even higher standard. And so the wheels just keep on spinning. If you struggle with imposter syndrome, you may have experienced what is called the imposter cycle. The imposter cycle occurs when the individual faces an assignment, obstacle, duty, or other achievement-related task and responds in one of two generalized ways, by either over-preparing or procrastinating. In over-preparation, the individual puts in an inordinate amount of work or effort to achieve the same goal as others due to the belief that they are inferior to others and must cover for this fact by appearing superhuman lest anyone figure out that they are a complete idiot. In cases of procrastination, the individual attempts to delay the horrific discomfort of the fact that they are a complete idiot, unable to complete even the simplest of tasks. So they put off doing them for as long as possible until they finally do them in a frazzled, hurried, last-minute preparation, therefore fulfilling the imposter prophecy. As a perfectionist by way of never feeling good enough, I fall into the over-preparation camp. I have trouble shutting my brain off as she thinks through clever ways to cover for the fact that I'm an imposter. But maybe if I research and write out my podcast scripts in painstaking detail, but try to make it sound kind of natural, no one will notice. This is called the imposter cycle because this will repeat when tasks come up or when goals are reached forever in perpetuity until you go to therapy and A, figure out where this all began, B, how to give yourself the love that was lacking that made you believe you were not good enough, and C, how to actually start believing that you are good enough and that the pursuit of perfection robs you of joy and presence in your life. The imposter cycle is a behavioral reenactment, meaning that it represents dissociated feelings of shame that are being triggered in a situational context, where the individual might not even be consciously aware that they are responding and acting out of a place of internalized shame rooted in the past. As an example, someone who struggles with imposter syndrome might be offered a promotion at work and then spiral into overwhelming feelings of unworthiness or feel that they chose the wrong person, are undeserving, and that they will be unable to succeed in the new role, and they might respond by staying up late to research this new job, obsessing over the right way to do it. Similar to how they felt when they got that lead in the ballet as a teenager and spent countless additional hours in the studio rehearsing over and over, much to the detriment of their emotional and physical health. Speaking of feeling like an imposter, I created a course called Out of the Broom Closet for witches who are struggling to feel pride in their identity and feel like they are stuck hiding their authentic selves. The program begins on the full moon of May 12th, and you can check it out in the show notes and get access to pre-sale pricing. Part of feeling like an imposter also means feeling like everyone is smarter and better than you, and they all hang out together at their parties for the in-group, and you're not invited because you're a complete idiot. An in-group is a social group that a person identifies as being a part of based on factors like nationality, race, religion, socioeconomic status, or political affiliation. Wanting to be part of the in-group is part of our biological hardwiring because it ensures increased community safety, the sharing of resources and knowledge, and the securing of self-object needs like belonging and twinship. We tend to judge and treat people who are like us more favorably than people who are different from us, meaning that we seek out in-groups to positively reinforce our sense of identity, safety, and belonging. So it's like, if I don't belong to the horror in-group, or I'm not invited to this imaginary party where everybody's watching Terrifier, where do I belong in the horror community? Do I even belong at all? You likely do not care whatsoever that I have not seen Terrifier. You probably never thought about this fact in your life because you are too busy worrying about your own issues or like why Katy Perry went to space. In relation to those who struggle with imposter syndrome, creating stories that their success is undeserved, I have created this narrative about this very podcast. I imagine that people are hate listening or sending it to their more astute horror friends with messages like, listen to this no horror knowledge idiot talk about how much she loves Halloween Town and A Haunting in Venice. What a joke. I imagine that my colleagues in the field look down on me for loving horror movies and being a witch, and question my morality. While this may be possible, it is also likely something called projection, which is when we unconsciously attribute our own negative feelings, traits, or behaviors to another person or group. Projection is a tricky thing, though, because it can sometimes be a chicken or the egg situation. Our own negative self-talk and beliefs undoubtedly have roots in experience. So while some of our feelings about people not believing in us are true if you have lived it, it's important to track that this does not turn into all or nothing or black or white thinking. Yes, you were hurt in the past, but you must risk vulnerability in order to grow. You must not give the opinions of people who couldn't see past their own limiting ideals so much power, and let them continue to dictate the rules that you will continue to live your life by. At the core of imposter syndrome is shame, which is an organizing belief in self often created through experiences of trauma that the self is bad, unacceptable, unlovable, wrong, or not good enough. This manifests in either the over or underachieving we see in the imposter cycle, where the individual is trying to correct their own perceived badness in an attempt to rescue themselves from exile of self and from others. In treating shame, the central task of therapy is to allow implicit memory to become explicit narrative, working slowly from what is known to what is not yet known. During this process, an individual becomes able not only to remember the roots of shame, but also to mourn the losses that the experience inflicted. A comprehensive undoing of shame is central, and this is achieved through the integration of memory and narrative, and the self through a grieving process, and the integration of self with other relationships as the imposter syndrome sufferer reconnects with the world. Which is why finding a supportive community, your very own in-group, is so helpful as well in affirming your identity, abilities, and sense of belonging. And finally, if you're up for it, you can give yourself a healthy dose of reality. Write down all of your achievements, all the empirical evidence that demonstrates your skills and successes. Ask someone you trust to reflect this back to you. Sometimes saying it out loud can actually help you in seeing exactly how hard you were being on yourself. But at the end of the day, your worth is not measured by how highly you achieve, but on who you are at your core. For me, tending to imposter syndrome has looked like working on my perfectionist-fueled not good enough feelings. I will probably be at this forever. It has looked like taking a step back to appreciate all the amazing people I have connected with through my work, both as a therapist and through this podcast, and creating my own metrics for success instead of following someone else's that don't even make sense to me anyway. As it pertains to horror, let's get real, you guys. I like beautiful things. This is one of my core values. I'm not trying to look at gross stuff. I love beautiful sets and costumes and people, and like Leanne Rimes says, you can't fight the moonlight.
Can't fight the moonlight, no.
Will I ever watch a Terrifier movie? Honestly, I don't know. When I was 14, I was really afraid of the Scream franchise and could barely watch the first movie. but returned to it in my 20s and completely fell in love, so who knows? But I do know that right now, splatter and gore don't tend to be genres that I enjoy. And having previous experiences trying to watch those type of movies because I was trying to be somebody that I'm just not, I didn't find much personal benefit in pushing myself completely outside my window of tolerance to experience things like disgust, dismay, or vomit. This isn't really about Terrifier though, is it? This is about feeling good enough as I am. This is about finding my own place and knowing that my self-worth is not based on the movies that I watch or ramble on about, but about who I am as a person. That, my ghouls, is the story of me not watching Terrifier and feeling like a horror imposter. Mental Health is Horrifying is entirely researched, written, edited, and produced by me, Candace Green, registered and spooky psychotherapist. If you like this podcast, please consider rating and reviewing on your preferred listening platform. It really helps the show to reach all the other spooky ghouls out there, and I will be eternally grateful. And an eternity is a very long time for a vampire, okay? If you live in Ontario and are interested in psychotherapy with me, I offer therapy for final girls in haunted houses who want to make sense out of the guts of their lives. I specialize in grief and trauma and incorporate both tarot and dream work into my practice as tools to delve deeper into fields of psychic terrain. Check out my new course, Out of the Broom Closet, for witches who want to move from shame to pride in their identity as a witch and live more fully as their authentic selves. It starts on the full moon of May 12th. You can follow me on Instagram at Mental Health is Horrifying, and you can also learn more about me and my services through my website, manymoonstherapy.com. Or you can also howl at the moon and I will hear your call. Bright blessings.